Take it away, Kevin.
Thanks, Nina. And thanks everybody for being here today for another great AIM webinar, this time with our friends from Helux, talking about, as Nina mentioned, moving from chaos to knowledge, steps for better intelligent information management. And you know, these AIM webinars are important because organizations today are moving to become more modern. And in most cases, that means improving flexibility and agility and service. But it's hard to do that when things are in chaos with our information. In our research here at AIM, members consistently tell us that the amount and variety of information that they must manage is often out of control. Data silos, disparate systems, piles of duplicate and obsolete documents can really hinder our ability to keep up, much less innovate and outperform. So how can we move from chaos to knowledge? In this webinar, we'll discuss using an approach using 4 areas of focus: discovery, content, knowledge, and change. We'll discover how to analyze your enterprise content and your current information architecture, ways to improve and leverage content using advanced techniques and tools like AI, strategies to remove the chaos and improve process performance, and steps to get it all done to better manage change and get C-suite support. So I'm looking forward to our discussion today, but before I introduce our guests, I do want to mention that we want to hear from you too. After all, we're a big community of experts here, so I'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So feel free to chat with each other in the chat section, and if you have some questions along the way for our guests, please enter them into the Q&A feature, and we'll have some time at the end for your questions, and we'll get to them, as many of them as possible. All right, with all of that said, let's get to our guests today, starting with Dan Teifer. Dan is the VP of Product Management at Helux. His focus is on helping clients by creating solution strategies focused on attaining a high rate of adoption and customer retention. Dan, welcome aboard today. Are you with us?
I am with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan. Joining Dan is Safina Hassan. Safina is the Director of Customer and Partner Success at Helux. Safina is a certified change practitioner, business analyst, and a former Microsoft MVP. Safina, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
All right, and also with us today is Erica Telly. Erica is Senior Product Manager on the Microsoft Purview product team, and she's an expert in data lifecycle and records management. So Erica, welcome aboard.
Thanks, glad to be here.
All right, let's get into it. Dan, I'd like to start with you if I could, please. AIM
Sure.
members tell us that information is everywhere and often flowing and growing beyond our ability to keep up. Can you tell us some best practices to get our arms around all of our enterprise information and to better discover and analyze that information and systems that support it?
Well, certainly. Well, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, the answer is easy. It's the easy button. You just press it and it all goes away.
Yes, okay.
If it were only that easy. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, and perhaps best way I can do this is maybe give you some food for thought and some things that we've used to help manage this problem with some of our customers. And I think if you really break it down into its components, it's really about knowing about what do I have, where is it, and what am I going to do with it? And how do you get that information? And it's definitely not easy to get that information. You definitely have too much information to try and do this manually. But the one thing that I would say to start out with, even before you get to that, is essentially identifying the problem that you're trying to solve. Because essentially you're trying to discover what you have, but what do you want to do with it? And what are you looking at? Because there's different twists to this, and people tend to conflate several different things into one. Are you really trying to amalgamate systems of record or collaboration into one? So you're looking to consolidate. Are you looking to migrate data from, let's say, file share and decommission them? Or are you looking just to figure out where I might have some dark data and to figure out what I have, and I'm just looking at reporting? Or, and this is a little less common, but are you really looking at your existing system of collaboration record to see what you have in there to make sure that your information architecture is working. So defining the problem is really important, because really the next step is discovering what you have. And this is where technology, and I'll speak from the technology end of it, is where you can get an index that can go out and crawl and find your information and bring back data about your data. Why is that important? Well, it's going to help you answer the question of what is it? What am I going to do with it? But you can also see the trends in your data. You could see how it's being stored. You could also help with your information architecture. We've seen this at clients that do this on their existing system, and they see a lot of duplicate data or data with similar names in different locations. And so is it because you're making that difficult for the end users? They don't know where to place the content. So discovery is really a means to an end, where you're trying to gain this better understanding of your data so that it can be leveraged for insights of actionable things like metrics or reporting or decision making, or doing a ROT analysis, where a lot of the discovery products today are wrapped into products that can also do a ROT analysis, which is looking at redundant or duplicative information, outdated information, or trivial stuff that you probably don't want to move into your existing system, or that may exist in your existing system. So discovery can really help you with all of these things. And I think that that's kind of a really good first step to trying to figure out what problems you're trying to solve.
Well, I think this discovery phase is essential. You've got to know what you have before you can do anything with it, or recognize what risk it represents or what opportunities it might represent. But Dan, as you mentioned, it seems like that's not a manual process. So what should an organization look for in a tool to really help with this discovery phase?
Yeah, it's definitely not a manual process. And everybody has seen over the years data explosion, which is just increasing and increasing. We're also trying to make it a lot easier for what I call the content creators, the end users, the people that are creating the content. We're trying to make it easier for them to create content. And so there's always going to be a problem of having, extra data and a lot of data in your system that you just can't manually inspect. There's just not enough summer students in the world to be able to go through and inspect content manually. And
My vice president used to call that the Attila the Hun method.
I like that. That's about right, actually. Oh my God, that's good. I'm going to use that if you don't mind.
Just send me a check every month. That's fine. You bet.
Excellent. I'll send you $1 Canadian. That's worth
okay, cool.
at least a dime US.
But okay, so what about these tools though? There must be an approach or a tool set that I can use to really look at. I mean, information is everywhere. I think members are telling us it's not only a lot of it in big systems that we know about, but there's information in places that we don't even know about. So how do I discover, what are the tools that I can use to really help me discover all of that information on firsthand?
Excellent question. And what I would say for these are the following things that I think you should look for in a tool. Lots of them available in the market. Of course, we happen to have one, but that's neither here nor there. But what you really are looking for is data discovery is really about collecting and collating and evaluating data from multiple sources. And you want to look for trends and patterns in the data. And so you really want a tool that's easy to use. You want something that could be non-technical, so you don't have to hire a developer to run scripts periodically. You want something low code or no code. You want something that can provide deep discovery capabilities. It doesn't matter where the data is, I should be able to track it and present it. Something that recognizes your data types. It should be data agnostic. So whatever format they're in, it's able to recognize and put that together. Something that also allows for reporting. So you have an ability to report on your data. Obviously, it has to be within a price point, of course. And some of the tools, which, of these discovery tools are also integrated with ROT analysis, classification, and migration. If that's important, great. If it's just, having a tool that shows you what you have, lots of choices out there, but really suitability boils
Hmm.
down to what your organization really needs. Doing a gap analysis is really important to make sure that it suits your requirements.
You mentioned rot and redundant, obsolete, and trivial information. We've heard here a number of times that organizations often have a ton of rot. In fact, some analysts say somewhere between 60 and 80%. That seems like a lot to me. Do you find that to be true? And if so, what tools or approaches can you recommend to help us get rid of rot?
Sure. So the end users, or what I like to call them, the content creators, generally like to hoard. 80%, I'll be honest, I've never seen that personally. Wouldn't surprise me though, because even rot itself within the same organization, different departments, because you have different people, varies greatly.
Would you say that
And
that 60 to 80% is high in your opinion,
I,
or
I,
is that
I
off
would,
base?
yeah, I would say that is high, but I mean, it's going to vary by region, it's going to vary by
Right.
organization. I would say the following, that it's not uncommon to find on an unmanaged server, like a file server, for example, that you have at least, let's say, 1/3 of the content that follows the O and the T, which is the obsolete and the trivial.
Right.
And you could find an additional up to 15% or more of duplicate data,
Right.
exact duplicates, because people, if they don't know where to find something, the first place they look, they'll find it, they'll copy it, put it somewhere else, or put it in
Yeah.
the same one, and then you get copy, copy, copy. We've seen this.
Right.
So, you could approach the 40 to 50%. I've never seen 60 to 80, but
Okay.
honestly, it wouldn't really surprise me that does exist. And you had
So a
mentioned,
ton, still a ton,
still a ton, correct?
that, as I put it.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that here's my take on it, and some people might disagree with me a little bit here, but as long as you have users, you're going to have rot. Period. Even if you have governance and policy procedures in place, because they don't prevent the rot. Yes, they may control it, they may get rid of it. However, there's still reasons to go in there and find it ahead of time, especially if you're doing a migration or even searching in your existing system to make sure you're really triaging and getting through that, because there's still a risk involved with any of this. And once again, technology here can help, because having a tool that can help you classify your content and provide additional metadata in that report, which we had defined before as the discovery phase, well, that's going to help you with creating rules to remove your data. And that's why a lot of discovery tools are part and parcel wrapped up with a rot analysis capability, where essentially you're really looking forward to something that can detect duplicates, of course, tag information to be excluded on the basis of numerous factors. That could be size, that could be age, authors, locations, extensions, it could be created or modified dates. There are lots of things that are all going to play into the R, the O, and the T. The
Okay.
redundant information is probably the one where you're really going to need the most machine driven help, because you're
Okay.
going to need something that can compare the two, because you certainly can't visually inspect or do that. And I think one last point kind of to make about rot, that I kind of briefly mentioned before is, well, why remove it at all? Just let the system of record or collaboration manage it with a policy. And not only are you increasing your cost by doing so, you're also increasing your risk. And there's two things that can happen if you don't give end users the single source of truth. You can have what I call policy drift and data drift. Data drift is where you have two different users modifying two pieces of content where you should only have one. So your data drifts. And you could have policy drift if you have duplicates in your system, for example, where they're in different locations and being managed differently by different policies. And so that
Okay.
also brings up the risk. So
Okay.
very important to get tools that enable you to do this.
All right, Dan. Well, Erica and Safina have been waiting patiently. Let's bring them into the discussion now, starting with Erica, if I could. Erica Telly from Microsoft. Look, it seems to me that organizations with better governance of records management, better information management in general, more intelligent, if you will, are in position to really outperform their competitors. So it's critical that those of us in our industry sort of make a strategic leap or a mindset leap, if you will, from just a data only focus, a governance only focus, to also a knowledge focus or a business tool focus when it comes to information management. What are some best practices that you've seen that you recommend that do that, and how can we apply them today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great question. So what I've seen work really well across organizations of all size, public, private, is first doing some work to position the work that we do in information governance and knowledge management as strategically important and something that they should be prioritized. And I've seen companies successfully do this by either talking about the importance of data as one of the most strategic assets in the organization, and therefore how to increase the quality of that data, or one that's really becoming well-funded is positioning it as helping security. The less you have to protect, the more you know what it is, the better you can secure it. Focusing on the knowledge management aspect of it, let's focus on increasing the quality of data. Information managers are in a very unique position because you truly understand how your organization finds, creates, uses, and the life cycle of this information. And so you're in a unique position to start approaching different business leaders and different business units to talk about more analyzing that in depth and where you can increase quality, reusability, context around that information to help them do their job better. So instead of focusing on our goals of information management, focusing on their goals of doing their jobs the best that they possibly can, which in then turn benefits us as a side effect.
I think that's an important. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Erica,
Go
I
ahead. Go ahead.
interrupted. Please go on.
No, go ahead. I can save it.
Oh, well, I feel bad now. I interrupted you, but I think you make a super important point. And I have been doing research recently about the failure rate of digital transformation efforts. And it's somewhere, according to the big analyst firms, somewhere between 70 and 95% failure rate, depending on how you define digital transformation and how you define failure. But that was astounding to me. And what really comes to the top with the research on this is that there's often a disconnect between our efforts with technology and transformation and the business objectives of the organization. They're often not that aligned. I'm surprised. And so what you're saying is to really make sure that those two things are aligned, and really our mindset needs to shift in a sense from information governance alone to one where we're impacting business performance, and how we shift our mindset and understand where the business needs to go and where that overlaps on what we do. That's the sweet spot where innovation starts to happen. And that is where things are starting to move in our industry. Do you feel that is so? And if so, what should we all be doing about that?
Yeah, I love the way you put this. It's absolutely the case. End user experience is king, and we need to optimize on that as the first priority. I see the projects that do succeed, the information managers talking to their leadership to understand what priorities have they already decided on, and then making a case for how information management helps to support that goal. And more importantly,
Right.
what will happen if information management isn't a component? Like, what are the consequences of not doing it, as well as the benefits of doing it? Just another thing to think about, AI is all the buzz, right?
Right.
Chat GTP. How do we build these AI models? It's by having a high quality set of data to train them. Whether it's a large language model or a different type of AI model, all of them require good data to make it happen. So
Right.
how do you find this good data? Hey, that's you, information manager, helping the business to increase their quality. So down the road, you can take advantage of some of the benefits of AI. For some leaders, that might be too esoteric and in the future, but for some, it might help them.
Well, good data equals good decisions. I learned that in graduate school, right? And so we're really talking about the same thing: good data, good decisions, good data, good AI processes, good, results happen when the data is good. So that's an important point. All right, let's move on to Safina Hassan, Director of Customer and Partner Success at Helix. Thank you, Safina, for waiting so patiently. I want to ask you a little bit more about some of the AIM research or the feedback that we are getting from our membership. And that has to do with the management of change and sponsorship. Ultimately, no matter the technology, you've got to manage the change, manage the effect on people and workers. And you've also got to get buy-in and support from decision makers in the C-suite. And AIM members constantly tell us that they struggle to get a seat at the table and to get the funding and support they need to really innovate, even if they know what they should be doing or have ideas or are inspired. What is your advice for our attendees today who may be struggling with this change management sponsorship piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a challenge at every organization to get that buy-in at that top level. So it's definitely not a problem that's strictly related to a particular industry. It is across the board. But it really starts with what Dan initially mentioned, was defining the problem you're trying to solve. So the information managers start to develop an understanding of what problems you're trying to solve. And essentially, you're going to develop a marketing campaign to that C-suite, to those sponsors. And you're going to start to talk their language. Why is this important to them to buy in? So if we use Chat GPT as an example, if that is a strategic priority for a particular department, you're going to go to them with messaging that the importance of data cleanliness and getting your house in order will actually benefit you and help you focus on rolling some sort of AI models out to your organization. If you're speaking to someone in the finance department, as an example, maybe just-in-time reporting is really important to them, and that's something that their team struggles with constantly. Rather than telling them, hey, we want to do a big migration project and move you to the cloud, you can start to speak more of their language to get their buy-in. So you're really developing targeted messages to these leaders. It is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of perseverance and many conversations, because you do have the most change adverse people at the top of the ladder. So it is very difficult to have these conversations, but once you speak their language, the conversations start to flow. You generate a lot of excitement, and all those principles of change management come naturally.
All right. Well, Safina, you folks at Helix have a model that you use to help customers be successful in all of this. And we're skipping over a bunch of really great stuff. So if you're interested in learning more, certainly folks that are attending, there is more to know. But the model is discovery, content, knowledge, and change. And if I'm getting this right, it's like, look, you need to discover what your information is, as Dan put it, what it is, where it is, and how you're going to use it. Looking then at the content to see whether it's useful at all, whether it's rot or not, and how it represents an opportunity or perhaps risk. And that really leads to then a furtherance of the business knowledge or knowledge within the organization of how to fuel processes and things like AI and so forth, and managing the change, which is what you were just talking about, Safina. Can you give us an example of one organization that has been successful using this approach? What did they do and what were the results?
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this example. So essentially, if you think about the discovery piece, if you actually include change management at the onset of your project and you include your messages to the organization about the results of the discovery, start advertising to the company that, hey, did you know we have terabytes of data and this is causing a large investment of resources from our perspective, and start driving that awareness based on the discovery, people start to understand that this is actually important for the organization. And then once you go through the actual analysis of the content, you start to relay more and more messages. So your messaging is not, hey, we're migrating. The message is, really, why is this important to us as an employee, to our organization? How does this align to our corporate strategies? What is this going to mean for our bottom line? And by doing so, alongside with the project team, you're starting to create a desire for that change, which is, following along the ADKAR methodology of change management. And while you're creating that desire for the change, you can slowly start to create bite-sized pieces of knowledge, right? So starting to incorporate the technology into your messages. So, having the ability to manage one document and multiple versions behind it. What does that mean to the employees? What does that mean to the leadership? What does that mean to the organization? So you're starting to develop knowledge alongside the project team while everything is happening. And at that same time, you're starting to gain acceptance from everyone. You're always going to have those individuals who are questioning everything and anything, and that's absolutely okay, because they are the individuals in the company that identify those gaps and allow you the opportunity to be thoughtful in what you want to roll out and help you prioritize which features you're going to roll out, because you can't do everything all at once. So allowing the opportunity for your employees to provide feedback, and a constant loop of feedback, which reinforces the change to those involved. But I will say that the most successful organizations involve change management at the beginning, and they don't actually separate it out from the project. They're not called the change management team. They are fully integrated like a resource on a project. And their main goal is really marketing. So really, really marketing out. It's internal marketing is how I like to propose it. Change management maybe leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths because of other projects that may have not been as successful as hoped. But if we just talk about marketing the project, marketing the objectives, and ultimately at the end, you'll start to see that you don't need to really focus on creating training materials, because once people understand that they should change their behaviors, they will naturally learn the product, that they will be motivated to learn the product. And Microsoft works on the user experience and the design. There's very little for us to do in terms of training on how to upload a file or how to tag a file. It's really easy once you get their buy-in.
All right, very good. Well, we are here today with Safina Hassan, Erica Telly, and Dan Teifer. If you have any questions for our guests, now would be the time to enter them into the Q&A. We're going to have a Q&A, some time for questions and answers here in a moment, so please put them in there. Let's take advantage of having these three great experts with us today. So bring forth your questions. We'll be sure to try to get them into the discussion here in a moment. But let's go back to Dan for a moment. Before we do, Dan, we've been talking about better intelligent information management, and then the face of this idea is really changing rapidly right now. What should we all be thinking about, strategizing for today in order to be prepared for the world of information management in 5 years' time?
Yeah, that's that is a very, very great question to ask. And what I would say is one of the things that you can do today is get your house in order so that you have more time to spend for the things of tomorrow. And what I mean by that is technology changes, it changes very rapidly. just Microsoft with their generative AI and Microsoft Copilot, where it's going to be even now easier to create and generate information. You have to learn about how these could be implemented in your organization, and you have to take it bit by bit. And I think that it's important that if you have your house in order to begin with, or at least try to minimize and to maximize what the controls and the everything that you have in place with a good information architecture, for example, it will help you in the future, because that's not going to change. There are certain things that are, I wouldn't say the information architecture is static, but it's something that is very important for your end users and for them knowing where to put things and how to manage content for the folks like Erica, who will now have a chance, because information architecture is a good anchor for downstream events that you want to do, whether that's governance, records management, protection. And so learning new things comes easier, I think.
All right, very good. All right, one last question, Dan, before we get to the questions today. How does Helix help us with all of this? Are there some resources or next steps that you can provide?
Yes. So first of all, Helix, we are an independent software vendor, as well as have services, Microsoft Gold partner, member of the CSPP program. And we've been doing lots of, for the last 12 years or so, we've been doing lots of services in and around getting people into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, because that's our strong point. And so a lot of that has been not only when training in the various technologies that are coming out of Purview, Syntex, and Viva, and setting that all up, but we also have a couple of products, which you see there. There's kind of shameless plug, Themis IA and Themis ICE, which help with some of the things that I had said today. One of them does information architecture for SharePoint Online, and Themis ICE is a discovery and a ROT analysis tool that can, and a migration and cleanup utility all in one. And so we've had some really good success with our customers using our tools and services together, and that's what we do. And always happy to talk to folks. Here's kind of a shameless plug for Themis IA, which stands for Information Architecture, but this is essentially a way of centralizing all of the artifacts that you want to build in SharePoint and having essentially one interface to do it, which makes it much simpler, so you don't have to go to multiple places, and to be able to collaborate through a single place to create, and this is for SharePoint Online, of course, so to create sites and libraries, content types, columns, all that good stuff. And on the other end of this, this is essentially, if you think of the first product as being the scaffolding, well, this is the items that you're going to place in there. And this is Themis ICE, which is a migration and cleanup utility, and does some of the things that we had mentioned today: content discovery, exclusions, classification, and routing. And it's something that is going to be available as a subscription based on the Azure storefront very shortly.
All right, very good. All right, well, everyone, Dan, Safina, Erica, let's open it up to questions now. Please feel free to jump in, all three of you, as we get to some questions. And if you have questions for our guests today, let's do it. Enter them into the chat or the Q&A feature, and we'll be sure to get them into our remaining time today. But let's start with this one here from Martin. Martin, thank you for your question. Martin says, so how would an IDP solution for unstructured documents manage all this rot? Anyone have a comment for that? Dan, you're big on rot. How would you answer Martin's question? How would an IDP solution for unstructured documents manage rot?
Yeah, that's oh, I'm sorry, I must have pressed on something.
We can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, it's just,
yes, you're on.
I must have clicked on something because talking about the privacy and legal policies in my ear. Sorry about that.
Don't touch
Um,
anything, Dan.
Yeah,
Don't.
I know. That's the thing. I
We
keep
warned you
touching.
about that.
I keep
Hands
I
off.
keep touching stuff. Um, yeah, that's that's something that, I mean, in terms of number of systems handling rot, and it, it's going to be very difficult for if you think of discovery systems that can go out and discover a file and discover the metadata about the file. That's one thing that makes it that those systems are quite good at. If you're talking about a row in a database or something of that nature, there are some systems that obviously can work with that as well. But that is, very, very difficult to figure out what duplicates are in those kinds of systems. So not as easy, quite frankly. Lots
All right.
easier if it's file shares and kind of your traditional, let's call it your traditional way of doing things.
All right. Very good. How about this question here coming in from Mason? Mason, thank you very much. How to use AI tool to, I think he's asking how to use an AI tool to do better content management. For example, do you have an AI tool and what the budget might be for that? I guess he's really asking, what you recommends for a good AI tool, and how much is it going to cost me? Anybody have an answer for that?
I can cover that one.
Yeah,
Where do we
please.
start? I'm not sure we're going to be able to quote you a price right here and now, because
Come
it
on.
depends on a lot of things. Mostly how much. Usually they're priced based on the volume of content. But here's good content management is all about the context of the data, right? And how do you get that? IA gives you clues, the contents of the document, and if there's sensitive data or certain terms you're looking for, give you clues. Having something like an intelligent document processing system that was mentioned in the last question, scan the contents as if it was a human reading it and providing some context in the form of metadata or summaries is a way to do that. Really, AI is assisting you with analyzing the content at scale and then writing down some additional context about that file in some way that meets your overall strategy. So that's how it helps. It helps you process a lot of data faster.
All right. All right. And this question coming in, really getting back to our initial discussion about discovery. Should discovery occur before information architecture? It seems to me that discovery should happen after. I don't know. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I'd say discovery helps you with your information architecture. So they're really done. I mean, if you're doing a migration, obviously you could use the discovery to help you with some of your information architecture for where that migrated data is going to land. Because some of the trends and things that you can see in a discovery is how people are storing the information. And that may change in your system of record or collaboration, or because if they're using folders, for example, and 20 levels deep, you probably don't want to do that in your new system, for example. So it can help you certainly determine, also determine naming conventions as well, right? How files are named and that sort of thing. So I think they go part and parcel. One feeds the other. You certainly don't want to do your information architecture after the fact. That's always dangerous because you'll forget about it.
All right. I have a question in the remaining couple of minutes that we have. The model is discover, content, knowledge, and change. I like that model. I think back home at my place of business, I am going to be wanting some perspective and help on putting together a business case to do something like this. So in your experience working with clients in the real world, can you give us some recommendations about some elements that have really helped build a good business case, how to measure it, what to include in there, what has resonated to really move forward? Anyone have some last minute thoughts on how to really build a great business case for this kind of effort?
I can start, and
Okay.
I'm sure Erica's got a lot of great ideas as well as Dan. Yeah, so building a business case really starts with an understanding of where the corporation or your business is hoping to be, right? So really understanding where the priorities are for the organization, where they're looking to make investments, and trying to wedge into those various strategies within the organization. And once you figure that out, so if the organization is looking to digitize or digitally transform processes, starting to really understand which processes are very manual within the organization and what a migration to the cloud could do for this organization, and start to not necessarily determine an ROI, but you could use simple numbers as, hey, employees will save 2 hours a week, or your employees will save 48% of their day-to-day tasks by conducting this particular process, or perhaps automating something, or just simply cleaning things up, right? A lot of employees spend many hours just searching for information. And I think actually leaders spend more time searching for information because the employees are in the day-to-day of the content. So they have a pretty good idea how to navigate. It's the leaders actually who are spending the most amount of time looking for information, who then reach out to employees and are very disruptive at times because they're trying to get their work done, but their leader needs attention right away. So there's a lot of really creative ways to create a business case, but it's really dependent on the organization and where they would like to go.
All right, very good. That is Safina Hassan, Erica Telly, and Dan Teifer. Thank you so much for being a part of our event today. The discussion was great. I hope we get a chance to talk again soon. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Nina to close this out. Nina?
Hello, Kevin. This was a very informative session. And speaking of informative sessions, AIM is headed to New Orleans, and this conference this year promises to be unlike any other you've ever experienced. This year's theme is content in the flow of work. The curriculum provides you with a comprehensive and proven methodology for mastering your organization's content to operate more effectively, reduce costs, and stay out of trouble. Your role as an information management professional is always evolving, so register now and you won't want to miss out. The link has been put in the chat. As we bring this webinar to a close, just a few last minute reminders. We've recorded this webinar so you can catch anything you want to hear again in a recap email that'll be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources to this webinar was put in the chat. You'll find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through that link. Also, don't forget to take our feedback survey and let us know how we did. I do know that some people did get some last minute questions in. We'll make sure to get that to the panelists as we've gone to a close. I apologize that we weren't able to get to it, but they will receive your questions and they'll reach out to you regarding answers to that. So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask our panelists if they have any last minute key takeaways for our audience. Erica, Dan, Shapina, anything you want to leave our audience with today?
Just come drop by our booth at the conference and we can have more conversations.
Yeah, booth 210.
Absolutely. And Kevin, do you have any last minute key takeaways for our audience?
Well, look, if you couldn't tell, I really love this model: discover, content, knowledge, and change. I think that's a great way of framing our efforts to build intelligent information management. And so I want to thank the folks at Helix for bringing that forward. And I think that's a great model that can help in strategic planning. So thank you.
Absolutely. And again, like Kevin said, a big thank you to our sponsors, Helix, for a wonderful, informative webinar. Thank you for coming, everyone. We hope to see you again soon.